Now, who's brave enough to follow that wonderful girl? I was just so moved and incredibly inspired, and I think we are in very good hands if that's our future. Yeah. So, thank you, Samira. And, we just had a conversation backstage, and we agreed, she booked me so that we can have a conversation, but I feel like I'm the one who's going to win, So, thank you so much. All right. I thought it would be great to bring a Canadian perspective, tell you a few things about me, and then hopefully offer a little bit of insights and some perhaps inspiration for all of you here. So I have been an entrepreneur since I finished grad school, and that was long enough before there was a startup community. You didn't start up, you just opened up for business. So I opened my first business in 1991 in the music industry, and then moved on to apparel and accessories. My sister is here today, and she's still talking to me because despite all of the errors and mistakes, she's had a front row seat and seeing it all. So it's so important to have cheerleaders. This is kind of fun, considering I just followed Samira. This is where I like to start, and this is my Fearless Photos project that I've been taking really around the world, so it's really quite well timed. So this is my 10-year-old self, and it's the only piece of homework that I'm going to give all of you here today. And my mother loved the picture but was horrified because I gave myself a haircut right before picture day. Those are my own layers that I introduced. Anyways, why this is important and the piece of homework, like when I look at this, my 10-year-old self, and I keep this picture handy, I have it on my desk at home, is because I look at myself there, and much like what we just heard from Samira, I think I'm fearless there, and I can do anything. And listen, it's hard out there. We've got the bumps and the challenges and the obstacles, and it's really important to kind of remember yourself in that fearless time. In my case, it happens to be at 10. I think Samira, it'll be every year. She can just take any picture. But I do encourage and ask all of you to go and find a picture of yourself when you see yourself as fearless, and keep it handy. And it can be very grounding, and can also kind of remind you of all that you need, all the that extra fortitude that you need when you are on the journey, which we know that entrepreneurial journey is very challenging, and particularly for women. So a lot of us familiar with this. We talked earlier, we heard a little bit about imposter syndrome. Who here is familiar with Amy Cuddy? Okay, quite a few. So I think this is a perfect example of her power pose. This, like, Wonder Woman is my favorite superhero ever. And so I feel like there's a young girl doing her power pose. And if you haven't watched Amy Cuddy's second most popular TED Talk of all time, and she talks about the power and importance of this power pose and how you can transform yourself and give you that little lift. Please watch it. She also she has a new book out that talks about the imposter syndrome, so another great tool. I am fortunate enough to be a member of the Women's Leadership Board at Harvard Kennedy School, and so we get the latest access to all of the great research, and so we've had the opportunity to hear as her research was coming out. It's really inspiring. So I think we as entrepreneurs, whether you're starting up your, on your second or third company, we need all those extra lifts. So if it's a power pose, don't be afraid to use it. I have heard from lots of people that once they started to incorporate it, they found it to be really useful, particularly women. So this is fun. I was on a all-female trade mission to Brazil, to Sao Paulo, and was obviously put on by the Canadian government, and a lot of interesting entrepreneurs and female, and they took us to this place called Butantan, and in many senses it was really the biggest nightmare for me, because it was a 100-year-old, so not the age, that didn't scare me, the 100-year-old place that had been and continues to prepare the anti-venoms for saving lives. But that also meant that they had the most terrifying creatures all in one spot. And so we went walking along and seeing it. So this is molting, as they call it, from a huge snake. I was thinking, do I speak snake? Am I going to have my Harry Potter moment? But no, it didn't happen. I was fine. And but the reason why I have it here, and I thought it was really important when we think about our entrepreneurial journey, snakes tend to shed their skin 2 to 4 times a year. And so when you think about the skills that we need and that whole notion of what got you here won't get you there, this whole idea of having to upgrade your skills, not just in committing to lifelong learning, which we know really is the only way to stay relevant and in demand, but beyond that, are you consistently thinking about what else do I need to do? How do I need to amplify my leadership? And in so doing, and we heard some interesting ideas around staying open for feedback and thinking about intention. So also for you, are you bringing intention to your own leadership? And thinking really carefully about what is it? What are some of the old ideas, old ways that I'm doing things that I need to shed? And imagine going forward, adopting some new ideas and new skills. So this kind of follows on with that whole notion of get comfortable being uncomfortable. It's not a new concept, it's not my own, but I think it is really worth mentioning and reminding ourselves that feeling that we have, sometimes that awkward, uncomfortable feeling, maybe some of our amazing women that we heard from yesterday when they were about to pitch probably had that feeling, I'm scared. And we heard that, that kind of feeling of fear. And we know that's part of our everyday life, particularly as entrepreneurs. So how do we accept that feeling of discomfort and say, well, that's actually part of my whole growth. And if I commit to it and I ensure that I keep putting my hand up, even though I don't want to. I don't know if this happens to anybody else, but sometimes I will say yes to something because it's something I want to do. And then as the date comes closer, I'm terrified and I don't want to do it. So then I go through the whole journey of, well, maybe I could just cancel. Maybe I could tell them I'm sick. Maybe I could break my leg. Maybe I should go skiing, I mean, is it just me or do other people feel this? Yes. Okay, good. I'm not alone. But then here's what happens. Then you feel like, wait a sec. This is exactly what I wanted. And so you go out there. And my company, the Beacon Agency, we completed a national study in Canada on women entrepreneurs and their approach to risk. This whole notion that women entrepreneurs are risk adverse, which is not true. And our research has shown that. But it's a great reminder that we have to push ourselves harder, faster, further, and also, take on the job of some myth busting along the way. So our next study is going to be on women entrepreneurs and innovation, because we believe that we will find that women tend to innovate differently. Some of that has to do with access to capital, which we heard consistently is a big challenge, and we know that. So when you have less, you get very creative. But that's also true of all startups. So and access to capital, is a challenge for all startups. But I just would like to remind you that kind of terrifying feeling is you growing. And so once you acknowledge that and understand that is going to move me closer to my goals, it can be pretty exciting. Anybody familiar with it? It's an old book. It's probably sold 1 million copies, but Feel the Fear and Do It Anyways. Anybody? If you haven't, it's a really great, simple little slip of a book. I always like to provide some practical takeaways because I think that's helpful. So pick it up if it interests you, because we know that fear plays a big role in stopping us from getting all that we want to. So again, if you can accept and actually push yourself towards this whole notion of being uncomfortable, it can take you to some pretty interesting places. Oops, went the wrong way. Here we go. So, power of mentorship. I've been a mentor to over 50 women in business and communications and consistently in my career. I've also had the benefit of tremendous mentorship as well. We heard yesterday that, forget a mentor, you need a sponsor. And I agree, and actually in Canada co-created a program called the Protege Project, which was all around how do we get women that are just below C-suite and get them C-suite ready. And we did this by doing matching with cross-industry and cross-company with high potential 35 women a year with an organization called Women in Communications and Technology. So sponsorship is critical. It's so important. But the first step, at least in my view, is mentorship. So, you have to start to create champions. And a great way to do that is to find mentors. And, I recognize I'm here in the Valley, so not saying that this is, that I'm bringing an outside perspective, but I have heard, at least in Canada, often quite a few VCs will say, it's very hard to turn somebody down who asks for 10 minutes of my time. And so, you don't have to have a formal mentorship program. You could just start with picking up the phone and calling somebody. And let's face it, we're still surprised when the phone rings, right? Everybody finds other ways. So, be creative. But here's the other thing that I heard along with that, and this, I think, would not surprise anybody, is that so often people reach out and then they don't reach out again. So we talked about resiliency and tenacity, and we heard some of those themes yesterday and today, and certainly witnessed it from those women pitching. You're going to have to try and try again. So make that commitment and push yourself. And that's probably part of that uncomfortable feeling too, right? You did it, and then you thought, well, it's enough. I'm good. No, you're not. You're going to have to keep going. So, and also in my experience, there's lots of ways that you can seek, outside perspectives. I'm involved in currently, I'm running a mentorship circle. So it's a group of women from different industries that come together, and it's that cone of silence sharing in a safe place, because it is hard. We're expected to know all the answers. We're expected to have it all figured out. But let's face it, we need help. And asking for help really is, we're sometimes, I think, given this sense that that's weakness. But in fact, asking for help is truly a strength. So, get yourself on that pathway of mentorship. But equally, I would encourage you, each and every one of you also can be a mentor. And so, when we look at where we want the world to be, particularly for women, empowered leaders, we have to make that commitment both to ourselves, but also to our community as well. So, look for those opportunities and help others, because we're creating the future that we want. And so keep that in mind. It doesn't have to be a big, huge commitment, but look around your organization and spot talent and see who needs help, okay? Loved this. This was I was working in a company in Vancouver, and they had this on the wall. And I thought, isn't that the best feeling in the world? Because I think we spend so much time trying to control everything. We heard that earlier. Somebody was talking about trying to control what people think. We're just control. So if we were to pause and focus on the areas that we actually can control, just focus on those areas and let the rest go, I think we'd save ourselves a lot of energy, probably a lot of anxiety, and certainly some frustration along the way too. Final thought I'd like to leave you with is this one. So, what if we 10 times everything we're doing? If we start to really think in a whole big way, that's really exciting to me, because that means you're having very different conversations. If you have to think about what if, ... whatever that would mean for your company, your career, your decisions, what if? You might be a goldfish now, but, the outside world doesn't necessarily know that. And, if you really look hard at your own self-limiting beliefs, because, we're talking a lot about unconscious bias, but we're looking in many senses almost externally sort of like they have unconscious bias. Well, what are some of the self-limiting beliefs that you're carrying around? Be honest with yourself. How about do a little audit of the places where you're pushing yourself and maybe where you're uncomfortable. To me, as soon as it's like that uncomfortable area, I think that's exactly where you have to race towards. We don't want to, but that's what we need to do. So it's been my great pleasure to be here with all of you today. I bring you warm greetings from Canada, and I thank you, Denise, for hosting such a remarkable event. I will tell you, as I said, it's cold in where I'm from, in Ottawa, in the nation's capital, but we do have some of the things that are exciting is our Prime Minister, Justin Trudeau, is, calls himself a feminist, so that's very hopeful for our country. And exactly, that's clappable. Very clappable. And another kind of, and also our cabinet, our ministers, are with our Prime Minister, it is gender equal. Okay, so we're 50-50. That's pretty exciting. We still have lots of work to do. I want to be very clear. There's lots of work to do in Canada. But we also just had our federal budget, which had the first gender-based analysis to all decisions that were made. So this is an exciting time, and I'm particularly excited knowing that the Government of Canada thought that this is a place where big thinkers are and interesting ideas are being shared, and that they saw the reason to sponsor. So thank you all, and I appreciate it. Thank you, Denise.